Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee Lavallee Mckenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about spirit guides. Working with spirit guides is kind of a new agey term for an ancient mystical practice. And although working with what I call guides and teachers is a foundational part of my own spiritual practice, my personal growth, and my work with clients in spiritual psychology, I find the term itself a little dissonant for me. I think I find it dissonant because whenever we try to put words on the profound mystery and power of the transpersonal realm, it does them an injustice. Words are imperative to be able to conceptualize and communicate about things. But when we bring the metaphysical into the physical, we have to kind of dumb it down, taking an expansive, actually unfathomable realm, what some might call the spirit world, the God realm, higher consciousness, non-ordinary reality, as it's called in shamanism, and bringing that into ordinary reality. It's kind of like stuffing a genie into a bottle. I think this may be why in ancient Judaism, there was no name for God. Yahweh was the name God gave to Moses when he received the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, and it means I am, or he is. And eventually it was ceased to be spoken because later Jews thought it too holy to be uttered. In Islam, there's an avoidance of making images related to religious figures like Muhammad and Abraham, and I think this is for the same reason. Or at least part of it, is that when we bring the formless into form, when we bring the transpersonal into the personal, we lose something in the translation. So the one thing to know whenever approaching spiritual matters is that whatever our conception is, it's limited by our own filters and perceptions. And I believe that the highest work we can do as humans is to clean those filters and to purify our perceptions to be able to see and experience ultimate reality as clearly as we can. And working with spirit guides is a very powerful path to that kind of inner work. So what are spirit guides? For me, spirit guides operate on the same level of consciousness or allow us to access a higher resonance of consciousness in the same way as do Christian saints, Jewish prophets, Buddhist bodhisattvas, and the pantheon of gods and goddesses available in Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism. In shamanism and the earth-based systems of animism meaning everything is animated with the life force, even things we might normally consider inanimate with our very limited perceptions, like wind, rocks, the ocean, and the sun. Working with nature spirits, in my experience, resonates in the same pure and wise level of consciousness as spirit guides in other traditions. And angels and the angelic realm can absolutely be included in this. And the advantage of working with spirit guides, saints or gods and goddesses, is that they can really open the door to a direct or mystical connection with the divine that many people find inaccessible if we try to fly straight to the sun ourselves. If you ever saw the Charlton Heston 10 Commandments movie, I used to watch it every Easter. Charlton Heston looking very much like the God of the Old Testament that Michelangelo painted on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Big, muscly guy with long white hair. It's what a lot of people conceptualize when they think of God in the he form. It's a good example of the limitation of imagery around divinity, because that's certainly not what my God looks like. Because I tend to work with the goddess, and lately she's been coming to me in this form of Kali, who's a Hindu form of the divine feminine. And Kali is a spirit guide for me. And she's about 9 feet tall. She's got gorgeous ebony skin, giant breasts. She's sexy as fuck and a total badass. She has 2 attendants with her. And in my own spiritual practice, I have been in training with Kali. She bears a knife called Trigug, which cuts through the illusions of fear and separation. She burns away our bondage of self. I rarely talk specifically about my own personal relationship with spirit guides because, like I said, it drains the power out of it. It's sacred information. But Kali doesn't belong to me. In fact, I've heard it said that we are living in the age of Kali. But that's another podcast. So back to Moses coming down from Mount Sinai, speaking to God directly, kind of blew him away. I'm on a subreddit called Spiritual Awakening, and a lot of people have these really intense awakening experiences that can be super disorienting. Jumping from the kind of low-level resonance that most humans have to a really high-level resonance can kind of fry your circuits. And for me, spirit guides are intercessors, assistants, attendants even, teachers, certainly, to help us navigate our own spiritual development and to assist us in that clearing and purification I was talking about, and also to help us enter and navigate these higher realms in a safe, compassionate, and for me, very comforting way. Many people experience their ancestors as spirit guides, a loving grandmother who has passed. Frequently, pets and other loved ones who have crossed over will show up in the work I do with clients as agents of love and compassion, grounding and connection that most of us really deeply need. Our material needs may be well met in the Western world, but most of us are suffering deeply, disconnected, isolated, lonely, feeling both unloved and unloving. I've been fascinated with Dr. David Hawkins' levels of consciousness because it makes so much sense to me. He spent his life developing a scale from 0 to 1,000, ranging from low-level resonances like shame and guilt at around 20 or 30, fear at around 100, courage at 200, love at 500, peace 600, and enlightenment between 700 and 1,000. And we all have a range of resonances within us. We're very complicated, and we can hold fear, guilt, and love all in there. Probably some mathematical equation. I'm a 320 today, but in my experience, spirit guides in the realm of the transpersonal always resonates well above 500. And just connecting with, experiencing those higher resonances has a profoundly positive impact on us. Similar to studying with or being in the presence of a great teacher, or even just someone who's in a really good mood or tends to be a positive person. I did a podcast on energy matching, if you want to learn a little more about that, podcast number 68. And spiritual practice, which includes direct connection with these more accessible aspects of divinity that hold a higher resonance of our own, can be profoundly beneficial and really transformative just by hanging out with them. Jesus and the Christ energy is a very high-level spirit guide when approached in its purest form. Unfortunately, the Christ energy has been compromised in many religious traditions because, again, whenever we take a high-level resonance and try to run it through our own limited perceptions, which are often rooted in fear, ignorance, anger, and our own selfish agenda, our perception of it can really become twisted and inauthentic. I think that's why there's been a mass turning away from organized religion for a lot of people. In a place where spirit guides and working with the divinity directly in a very personal way, this mystical connection of conscious contact with God or goddess is really growing right now. Because we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when we're disconnected from the spiritual realm, we suffer. Having spent almost the first half of my life completely disconnected, believing I needed to take care of everything myself and being completely incompetent and unable to do that, when I was taught how to plug in through spiritual community, through the 12 steps, through personal transformation work in Buddhism and great therapy, and ultimately a shamanic practice, my life, my outlook, the way I feel about myself and life in general is completely transformed. From fear, rage, and disconnection, hopelessness, and addiction, to a life of service, joy, connection, and passion. I'm like one of those before and after pictures at the weight loss clinic with like the really ugly fat girl and the really beautiful skinny girl. I knew a girl once, honest to God. She said, "Oh, I'm a model." I said, "What do you do?" She said, "I'm the before model." And you know, she was a before model. Oh my God. Can you imagine telling somebody that? She was a crackhead living in a trailer park outside of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Yikes. That was a few lifetimes ago. Anyway, so now I'm going to contradict myself and say I like the word spirit guide because it sounds accurate. If you've ever been on a guided tour that was any good, a good guide can be invaluable, particularly if you're in a place where you don't speak the language or know where you're going. Spirit guides really can help guide us into these realms of higher consciousness, the transpersonal, the spirit world, that most of us have no idea how to navigate. And again, just by being in those places with these energetic forms is in itself transformative. Now, the non-physical, the transpersonal, the larger consciousness system is incredibly complex. And particularly on this realm, on the earth plane, on the material level, the middle world, as they call it in shamanism, not everything is trustworthy. When you're in line at the grocery store, the guy in front of you may be super nice, and the guy behind you might steal your wallet out of your purse. And in the spirit realm, just because something doesn't have a body doesn't mean it's got your highest good in mind. And in my experience, the spirit world in ordinary reality here isn't that different from the material world. And generally, disembodied spirits or energies or entities that are hanging out in the middle world are fairly low resonance, or else they wouldn't be here. It's very interesting in the Harry Potter books. In book number 5, The Order of the Phoenix, Harry's uncle Sirius is killed, and he's grieving deeply, and nearly headless Nick, Hogwarts, the magical training school where the children go, is filled with ghosts, and nearly headless Nick is one of those ghosts, and he comes to Harry, and Harry says, "Nick, you're dead, and how come I can see you? And Sirius died, and I can't find him anymore." This is a paraphrase. And Nick says, "Because I was a coward, I was too afraid to cross over." And all the ghosts in Hogwarts have their own personality and dysfunction, and many, if not most, disembodied energies or entities, spirits that didn't cross over, have some agenda of their own as well. Going back to David Hawkins' levels of consciousness, there are many levels of consciousness in the transpersonal realm, which is why I have found great value in shamanic practice. And through the shamanic journey, we leave ordinary reality very intentionally by either going down to the lower world or up to the upper world. Now, whether you understand those as actual places that we go that are up and down, or whether they're metaphors for moving through levels of consciousness is totally up to you. But it is effective that we leave ordinary reality and this kind of contested space where many things are distrustworthy and sometimes it's hard to tell. I've been conned by the con man more than once in my own life. Once we access these places of high intention, pure consciousness, these realms have only our evolution and best interest in mind. Because there's an understanding as we expand our own consciousness that everything is connected, and actually doing harm to anything harms us as well. I think this is part of the reason that Christianity had a taboo around working with anything that wasn't sanctioned by the church. Of course, there's a lot of other reasons for that as well that are nefarious in their own right, like control, colonization, power, and domination. There's a lot of darkness and light in everything that exists on this plane. In fact, mystical Christian practice, working directly with Jesus and Mary, was my first introduction to working with intercessors or guides and teachers. Now, there's a ton of work to be done in the middle world. That's what personal growth work is. And as we expand and elevate our own consciousness, that has a tremendously positive impact on everyone in our life, our own life experience, and I believe the pool of consciousness as a whole. But it's a good idea to connect with high-level, trustworthy resources, guides and teachers that are much more elevated than us, that can help us navigate the verities and complexities of ordinary reality. I have a team of trusted guides and teachers that if anything feels off to me or is new or unknown, I always ask them to check it out first. I don't have to rely on just my own very limited resources. There are actually unlimited resources available to us when we have the willingness and the knowledge in how to access them. All of the great religions, most valid spiritual paths, and even a lot of good therapy work will have methods for making these connections. If you're interested in learning more about the shamanic path, I'm going to be doing a free workshop on Tuesday, May 25th. And if you'd like to sign up for that webinar, you can click the link in the show notes. We're getting ready to release our first Open Door Growth digital course, Intro to Shamanism Lower World. If you're interested in exploring direct work with guides and teachers yourself. And I'm going to start doing some Instagram lives, 10 a.m. on Thursday mornings, Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. On Thursday, May 20th, I'll be meeting with Neil Allen, author of Shapes of Truth. He happens to be the husband of one of my favorite authors, Annie Lamott, a local Bay Area gem. And Neil's book offers this really interesting system of Platonist philosophy and Sufi mysticism. He works a lot with the inner critic, as do I, and that's what we're going to be talking about the next few Thursdays. How to dissolve and transform your own inner criticism and self-judgment. So if you're interested, check us out on Instagram at Open Door Growth. If you want a free download of the first chapters of my book, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, there's a link for that in the show notes as well. Lots of links today. And if you're curious to find out how spiritual psychology might benefit you in your life, or learn more about my 3-month mentorship program, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. Big love to my supporters on Patreon. And blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee Lavallee Mckenna for Spiritual Psychology.